Jaguars 25, Bills 20, the final score at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London. The Bills falling to 3-2 on the season. They lose for the first time since week 1. Joined by our Bills insider, Vic Carucci, to break down everything that happened in this game. And Vic, let's start off with the Bills. They got off to a sluggish start, down by 11 points after the first quarter. They didn't find the end zone until late in the first half. Just what did you see, and what do you think impacted this slow start that we saw out of Buffalo?
Well, you can't deny the fact that a lot of us were going to be curious to see just how tired this team might look because of the late arrival in London and the idea that they never really allowed themselves to get acclimated to the 5-hour time change, to the fact that they only had one really good night's rest before kickoff. And the Jaguars, meanwhile, had about 10 days in London because they had played the Falcons the previous week there. So we were looking for that, and guess what? We saw it. This was a team that looked jet-lagged, that they admitted, Sean McDermott and Josh Allen and others, about the lack of energy that showed up, and that the Jags had more energy in the early going. And in a game that wound up being pretty tight, if you want to look at things that made a difference, there it is. I mean, that slow start just never allowed them to get into this game soon enough. And by the time they were awakened, by the time the alarm went off in the second half, it was too little too late.
It was such a factor that Sean McDermott was asked about it by our Adam Benini after the game, and he said that if they ever do go overseas again, they'll have to reevaluate this whole process. The Bills only had 7 points until late in the fourth quarter. How much of it was that jet lag, and then how much of it were things like execution, penalties? We saw drops really be a problem in this game as well.
Yeah, I think it might be an overstatement to blame everything on jet lag. This team, when it is at its best, it's been functioning well and efficiently, and we didn't see that for too long a time in this game, and it cost them, especially on offense. The 3 and outs for a team that had only had 4 3 and outs going into the game all season, and then all of a sudden you see 2 on the first 2 drives, you see punts on their first 4 possessions. That was very much an un-Bills-like situation. And then compound it with a defense that lost so many key players. We're missing key players going in, and then that list just grew. And of course, the biggest loss being Matt Milano. If you want to talk about something that you would think would take the energy out of a team, it would be his leg injury, knee/lower leg, as Sean McDermott described it, and said it didn't look good. And looking at that as a prolonged thing, which it figures to be, is a serious blow to a team that also has other injuries to try to overcome.
And talking about the injuries, this is a defense that looked so good week 2 and week 3 against the Raiders and the Commanders. They were building some energy. They had a great performance against the Dolphins, but it ended on a sour note with Trey White going down. Now you have Matt Milano go down, Daquan Jones. Just how much of a toll collectively does all of that take on this defense? How hard is it going to be for them to sustain the success that they had early on in the season?
Well, on one hand, you can say they did a pretty good job of overcoming those injuries in the course of the game. A.J. Epinesa playing the game of his life with the 2 sacks that he had, the triple header with a sack, forced fumble recovery that killed a great Jags scoring opportunity deep in Buffalo territory. So it could have been worse. This could have been a more lopsided win for Jacksonville had Epinesa not stepped up and others trying to do their part. However, the toll was there. You could see as the game wore on, no Daquan Jones, and the Jaguars just hammering away, also alternating with some quick pace offensively to continually wear down a team that it knew was probably going to be sluggish and lethargic for some of those reasons we discussed as far as jet lag. But I look at it now on the long haul. That's where it really concerns me, because if the losses of Milano and Daquan Jones with a pec injury, if those turn into season enders or mostly the rest of the season missing them, this is going to be a tough thing for this defense to, I think, fill and find answers for. It's just not like you go down a roster that has some talent, but say, oh, we'll just plug in somebody to play Matt Milano's role. They don't have that guy. And Daquan Jones had been the most consistent, I think, defensive player they had all season. So trying to replace him will be a tough sled as well.
And those are two injuries in the front seven, but let's take a look at the secondary for a sec, because no Trey White, no Christian Benford. Kaiir Elam gets his shot to finally play for the first time this season. And by the end of the game, they have Micah Hyde covering Calvin Ridley on one of the most important plays of the game. Jamarcus Ingram came in for Kaiir Elam. How much of a concern is that second cornerback position for the Bills? Is it even something where they might have to look to make an addition at some point during the season?
I think the depth issues in the secondary were exposed. I also think the lack of speed overall in the back end of this defense was exposed against those highly talented receivers. Now, this is the same defense that held up well when they played Miami and all of its speed, but a lot of that was, of course, they had a healthier front, and they did the job against Tua Tagovailoa. In a game like today, there were additional opportunities for Trevor Lawrence, even when he was getting pressured, and he was at times, even after the injuries. But how long can that hold up? And on the back end, looking at that cornerback situation, I still see Kaiir Elam mostly struggling. And you wonder, Christian Benford, I mean, they got to get him back as healthy, as quickly as possible and healthy as possible. And remember, the bye does not come until much later in the year, because the Bills opted not to take the bye that is automatically offered after you play a London game or a game overseas. So this is going to be interesting to see kind of how this period goes, where there is no break for a long time. Will that break be coming at the right time late in the year to get some bodies healthy, or are they a team that, with a bunch of injuries piling up now, that is going to compound itself over these next several games?
Hard for the Bills to feel good about too much that happened in that game, but from your perspective, are there any positives at all that you saw out of this game? Anything good that the Bills did that you can see them, that they hope that they could take in forward when they play the Giants next week?
Yeah, I think I would point to A.J. Epinesa stepping in for Greg Rousseau and really bringing it. I mean, knowing he had to play the way he did. That was encouraging to see that. And I think there can be more of that from A.J. Epinesa. The team had identified him as, he was a second-round pick, but identified him as someone who could play at the level he showed in this game. He just hasn't shown it enough. But that's a good thing. The other positive might be that with regard to Josh Allen, you didn't see him on a day when you would have expected perhaps a lot of the meltdown to occur because of the way the game was unfolding, and because there was just not anything really clicking offensively. I still think he stayed pretty true to the Josh Allen he had been in terms of staying within himself, letting the game come to him. He didn't really force a whole lot, and he wasn't helped by some drop balls as well. So I think when you look back and he looks back on a game like this, I don't think there's any way that he's going to be saying, oh, yeah, I got to really go back to the drawing board and change this. He knew as well as anybody else who watched this that this was really just a sluggish team, particularly on offense, for too long a stretch in this game.
And if there is anything to hang your hat on, it's that the last time we saw a sluggish performance from the Bills offense, they roared back with those 3 straight wins. We'll see if they can do that again as they're back in prime time next week right here on Channel 2 when they take on the Giants on Sunday Night Football. Vic, always great talking to you. Appreciate talking to you, and we'll see you next time.
Same here, Jonathan.